What are my thoughts on what I just saw when it comes to Zebec? Even though nothing I say is financial advice, what do I mean by this? We all already kind of know, first of all, right? And this is going to give some context as to what I'm going to say. We already kind of know what Zebec did with NatPay. But then the thing is, people don't really consider it because people are like, oh, NatPay, who really knows all this? Who really cares? But here's my perspective. Not too long ago, Jim Hagan, which is the VP of NatPay, he did talk about how Zebec's integration with NatPay has basically kind of driven real-time innovation in the industry, like, kind of that global trade and finance space and all that. But then some people may be thinking, okay, who cares what, is have to be said when it comes to Zebec? Like, that's just kind of a very vague statement. I get it, but then at the same time, if we take a look at it, NatPay, again, if we take a look at its ISO 20022 compliance architecture, we have to think about what implications that could hypothetically do for Zebec in regards to Swift, right? And Swift is pretty famous in this space, I would say, when it comes to, the global trade and finance space. So then when I take a look at something like that, my perspective is that, sure, NatPay is not the most popular thing out there. Like, a lot of my friends don't know what that is. But at the same time, we have to consider kind of the aspects of ISO 20022 when it comes to NatPay, and then how Zebec, just inherently, because it is focused on that kind of global trade and finance space, what that could maybe do for its future. Now, only time will tell. I mean, I can't control anything when it comes to this, and ultimately, again, it's an only time will tell type of scenario. But I am pretty, I would say, happy to see what Zebec is doing so far, fundamentally. Now, the price is a different case, but I'm just saying, because, 10 cents, the ZBCN is still over 30 times lower than that, but at the same time, I do still like what I'm seeing when it comes to the fundamentals of Zebec. Not to mention, some of my friends out there, they like to say, oh, what Zebec did with Algorand is way better than what they did with NatPay. Now, here's the thing. Algorand, I think sometimes a lot of my friends out there, they kind of they kind of think about how popularity equals better partnership. But we have to consider sometimes the context, right? Sometimes a project, if they have a certain mission and they're partnering with another project that is more popular, but it doesn't really do much for their mission, how is that even that beneficial for the fundamentals long term? I think it's much better in some cases to kind of have an arguably less popular partnership, but it actually kind of helps their mission. Because even though Algorand does have an aspect of ISO 20022, but the thing is, Algorand as a layer 1 blockchain, I mean, we have to consider the adoption, I think, is pretty good, but in the long term, arguably, I would say that when it comes to what they did with Algorand, I don't know if it's going to be as dynamic as what they did with NatPay, because Algorand, sure, it's more popular, but what is it really going to do, for Zebec moving forward? It's just something that they could say, I think, moving forward to kind of maybe give themselves a little bit more credibility. But in terms of the actual fundamentals, I actually like NatPay, or should I say what they did with them, a lot better than Algorand. Even though I am still a fan of Algorand, but I'm just saying. So overall, when I take a look at Zebec, I like how they're treating it seriously. I don't think they're treating it just for fun and all this type of stuff. It's like, for instance, right? It's kind of like the effort that kind of counts sometimes. Like, let's say, for instance, I'm trying to play tennis or something like that. If I'm constantly practicing and all this type of stuff, just the effort that I put, even though I may not be that good, sometimes a coach or something like that, they might take a look at that and be like, whoa, wow, at least there's some effort there. As opposed to, let's say I don't really put any effort, then, maybe it's a different case. When I take a look at something like Zebec, my perspective is that when it comes to a project like this, because it is trying to still have that ISO 20022 compliance, having partnerships like, for instance, with NatPay and all this, I think that right there, is kind of playing a bit into the narrative of ISO 20022. Because sometimes a lot of my friends out there, they kind of have this perception that, if let's say a project does not have an aspect of ISO 20022 in the kind of global trade and finance space, they don't really kind of consider it as like kind of officially focused on that, even though it basically is. But in my opinion, when it comes to if Zebec is actually able to achieve that, that's going to really kind of put a stamp on it, right? In a sense where, hey, you know what? We are really focused on that global trade and finance space, even though they already are. But it's just kind of more so sort of this, I would say, stamp that kind of showcases that they actually are. You know what I mean? It's like, for instance, someone in the UFC winning the UFC championship. It just kind of solidifies that, yeah, they really are, full-time UFC person or something like that. It kind of validates their whole journey. So when it comes to Zebec, I feel like it's kind of like that a little bit. I kind of equate if it actually is able to have that ISO 20022 aspect as sort of like maybe arguably winning a UFC championship or like a Super Bowl or something like that. And who knows what the exact impact will be, but in terms of the fundamentals, I feel like it is a little bit kind of like winning the Super Bowl or like a championship, just because it kind of, I think, completes sort of the journey of Zebec in terms of what they're trying to do, and kind of again reaffirms its presence within this space. Even without that though, Zebec is still arguably like top 5, I think, in terms of popularity within the space that it's in as of right now. But if it actually could do that, I think it would put it more so in the level of like an XDC, because XDC already has that. I don't think it's ever going to overtake Stellar, but I'm just saying it's going to kind of put it a little bit closer in terms of the perception, I think, when it comes to XDC. But that's just my point of view. And XDC is a pretty massive project within this space. It's often considered the third most popular behind something like Stellar. So if Zebec could maybe arguably kind of reaffirm itself as the number 4 within that space, I don't see why that's such a bad thing. Now, overall, in my perspective, when it comes to what Zebec is trying to do, I mean, sometimes you like to say, oh, why don't they update more? Well, they're still updating, right? And the thing is, updating every single day, like, it's kind of tough sometimes if there's no new partnerships. So I feel it's pretty commendable how Zebec, even though they don't necessarily have a new partnership every day or something like that, but at least they're still kind of updating. And I like the cadence of their updates, right? Because they're not only just updating when the market is doing good. Like, if we take a look at it not too long ago, when ZBCN had a lower market cap than right now, Zebec was still updating. They just don't stop when it comes to that, it feels like to me. Other projects out there, they're still even stopping currently. So yeah, I just do like that aspect when it comes to Zebec. Overall, I'm just, taking a look at it and just staying patient. That's pretty much about it. And also, I feel like sometimes people kind of ignore what ZBCN just did not too long ago. Like, for instance, ZBCN was included in Bloomberg's first ever DeFi index, allegedly. And yeah, I mean, keep in mind, at that point, it was one of 23 that was selected, right? Across the entire DeFi ecosystem within this space. We have to consider how many DeFi projects there are. I mean, there are so many. But the thing is, ZBCN was included in that. And Bloomberg, again, it's very well known, right? So when I take a look at what Zebec has been able to do so far, it's pretty impressive. I mean, I guess ZBCN being included in that index, it was kind of pretty surprising to me, considering how ZBCN is by no means, like, I think, that popular within that space. But I think that kind of showcases the sort of fundamentals maybe of something like Zebec. I'm still staying patient though, but that's all I can do as of right now. However, I did want to make an updated video real quick, just kind of showcase how Zebec was talking about this NatPay, partnership. And then, of course, the VP of NatPay commented on Zebec. So I just wanted to make a video on that and just kind of talk about why I'm actually a fan of this. And I think it's actually, better than some of the previous partnerships they had. So that's why I'm just still staying patient, even though I'm not telling anyone to do anything. However, I hope you all have a nice day. It's Willie the Captain, and I'll catch y'all on the next one. I'm out. Peace. Bye.